Grasping the implications of the creator-creature divide, there will be no way for us to understand how the sovereignty of God is consistent with the moral responsibility of finite creatures like ourselves.
Okay, so if you kind of see where he's going with this, what he's ultimately saying is that this distinction between the transcendent and the immanent, the infinite divide between us and God, is going to be the basis on which he appeals to the concept of divine determinism. Now, he never calls it that, but I am, because that's what it is. Okay, so
It's just because you like to use terminologies that befuddle the mind, Riddle Master. This guy right here is the Riddler, just in an alternate reality, where he dressed up as a Christian instead, and he presents riddles to the body of Christ. For what reason? The Riddler doesn't need a reason to present riddles. He loves them.
he's going to ultimately argue for divine determinism, but any objections that you have against divine determinism are supposedly answered by this divide. And you have to ask yourself the question if it's a sufficient answer, and then also, obviously, if it's biblical, most importantly.
We agree with that here. So I'm glad you brought that up, because we intend to biblically discuss your every point.
Take two individuals who are indisputably within the system. Let us call them Smith and Jones. Suppose further that Smith is bigger, taller, and stronger than Jones, and so he decides one day to start pushing Jones around. Because they are both inside the system, both living inside the same reality, there's no way for Smith to act freely on Jones, pushing him from behind, say, without that action being simultaneously a removal of freedom from Jones. It is like one billiard ball displacing another. The more Smith acts freely on Jones in this way, the less free Jones feels. If Smith and Jones are attempting to occupy the same space, the more freedom the one has, the less freedom the other does. If Smith is free to push Jones down, Jones loses his freedom of standing up. Now, this is where our background assumptions
That was a pretty good analogy, man. That was pretty sick.
in our definition of God are so important. If we assume that God is within the system, this simply turns him into a cosmic bully. It turns Smith into Zeus. He becomes the biggest, baddest, and strongest Smith possible, but in his treatment of Jones, he remains a bully. Or to revert to our other image, making one of the billiard balls much bigger doesn't give the smaller one any additional liberty. In short, by neglecting the creator-creature distinction, we create a situation where other Christians hear us talking about the quote-unquote sovereignty of God, and all they can imagine is a muscle-bound God bullying all of us. And if
Okay, so hopefully his argument's clear in what he's trying to say. He's saying because God's outside of the bubble of reality, he's not just this muscle-bound bully pushing us around, doing physical violence against us. But again, even if we put...
Right, just like how even though before the foundation of the world Christ was slain, and God ordained that, just because God said that would happen a long time ago, in Isaiah chapter 53 and other places, God didn't have to come, in a second vessel other than Jesus to murder Jesus. Right? He didn't have to fulfill that with some kind of physical body of his own for that to take place. He ordained the means in which it would take place. To do whatever your hand something. Acts 4:28, is that where we need to go? Thanks, G1. For truly against your holy servant Jesus, whom you anointed, both Herod, Pontius Pilate, with the Gentiles and the people of Israel, were gathered together to do whatever your hand and your purpose determined before to be done. Are those things that these people did to Jesus a sin? God determined it by his hand and by his purpose. But he didn't have to come down and do it, right? He just came down as Jesus and got murdered are the people that were gathered together by God to do this thing to Jesus, the most heinous sin that ever existed. I love all these opportunities to read so many rich scriptures that these false teachers give us. It's a great opportunity to grow in the Lord. Maybe that's why they're here. We would just be sitting around fat and happy without them. You know, we'd have no reason to defend the faith. We'd have no reason. So maybe that's why they're here.